We are talking today about technology versus outcomes. Now, when we talk about technology in the advertising context, one of the most exciting topics is CTV, something that we've heard about a lot today. We can see that CTV is really like catching on with budgets increasing. This year, it's over $20 billion in CTV. That's double than 2020. SVOD's moving towards more of an AVOD model. The news about Netflix offering their inventory at a $65 CPM with no audience targeting. And so obviously there's a lot of interest there and it keeps growing. So when we talk about technology over outcomes or versus outcomes, what does that mean?
It's a good question. And I think the critical piece here, and honestly we're hearing a lot of this being talked about, at least in the last 3 or 4 conversations, was the market's getting more and more fragmented. Where's the concept of identity? Where's the concept of currency and measurement? And all of these levels of fragmentation can sometimes mean that, look, I'm going to go the easiest route. I'm going to go to the biggest volume. I'm going to go to what's considered the hottest thing in the marketplace. So when you look at CTV, it absolutely, as a technology, is bringing to the table what we've long wanted in television, right? The ability to target an audience and to reach an audience. When I say it's about outcomes, you come back to a couple of things we'll talk about in a minute, which is, well, at the end of the day, it's not digital in the truest sense, right? I'm still targeting a household, and I don't yet have a feedback loop from a tagging perspective. I'm still going to be looking at QR codes. I'm going to be looking at search activity. And it starts to now feel a lot more like data-driven television. So then you sort of start asking, well, it's not CTV or TV. It's the combination of both to drive efficiency for the advertisers that we're buying media on behalf of. And that's what we mean, pay as much attention, if not more, to the outcome as opposed to just the technology platform.
That's very true. And still, though, everyone's very interested in CTV to the level where advertisers increase their spend in CTV while a lot of the times decreasing their spend in other channels, such as digital, social, and linear TV that's been growing at a way slower pace. What is it about CTV specifically that we find so appealing?
So I think there's the very first one, it feels like digital, right? Can I go and just set a campaign and see it generate results? And I think, again, the panel just before the TikTok panel hit it perfectly, which is it really isn't fire and forget. It has to be dynamically measured. But there's something nice about being able to reach out to our audiences. The second piece is it feels measurable. If I've reached a specific audience and I know who I delivered an impression to, I can measure that, right? So I have that measurement perspective. So those two pieces feel like I can go out and reach exactly the audience that I want to reach, and I can measure the impact of the delivery. They're very new. It's moving away from the Nielsen panel. It's actually letting me see who we've delivered to. But those two pieces don't come together to make it a digital equivalent, right? I'm still looking at it, I'd argue, from the TV perspective. You look at the things that we do at A4 and in many ways have been doing for nearly a decade, which is the ability of using set-top box data, now extended with smart TV data, to look at who an ad has actually been delivered to, whether it's CTV or whether it's just linear television, create synthetic control groups to understand who wasn't delivered to, and then actually start doing true incremental reach and start doing true incremental return if you want to start bringing in a digital footprint, such as search activity, web activity, app activity, to associate those two together and demonstrate the true success that can be driven by television. And I think one of the greatest things that's happening at the moment, people go, oh, CTV is taken away from linear. You can see linear going down. You can see CTV with great acceleration. But if you look at what's happening in linear TV and add it to what's happening to CTV, you see this incredible explosion, again, in understanding the value of television as being a great media to convert and engage consumers into the advertisers' brands. So I think that's what makes it really exciting, and I don't disagree that it is exciting. I think the thing to remember is it's exciting because we can add it to what we're doing in a measurement environment already and start to generate that incremental that incremental value. But the kicker is, as long as we're driving incremental value for our clients.
Right, that's very true. And to zoom in on that a bit, the reason why we're viewing CTV as really the equivalent of TV more so than is of digital is because there are currently an average of 2 adults per household in the US. So like with TV, you can't know exactly who you're hitting, and that's where the modeling and the analytics really come into play. Now, thinking about that in that way, we are also starting to consider, okay, well, take a look at the price of each of those strategies.
Right.
So you have CTV inventory starting at $25, $28 for true CTV, such as, for example, Peacock, which is basically the same price as NBC primetime.
Right.
On the other side, you have MVPD inventory, which you can actually pay way less for, under $10. So how do we find the most efficient path forward with those pricing discrepancies?
So I think the important thing to remember is, and it's classic, it really is classic old media strategy for everybody that's been here, which is, how do I lay down my cheapest form of reach, and then how do I build on top of that reach, controlling my loss of efficiency, i.e. that's frequency, non-targeted markets, and then start to build up to those efficiencies. Again, we've heard it a couple of times today talked about, and Seema pointed to it, which is an awful lot of the inventory that we bring out of CTV, we want to lay down as incremental reach, because there are audiences we can't reach inside of linear and broadcast because they're cord cutters, or they're very low propensity engagement consumers of television, specifically of the content that's in the plan. That means that I don't want to try and reach them, because in trying to reach them, I'm going to spend an awful lot more money in the wasted frequency of the people that I've already addressed. So laying down the CTV over the top of my most efficient media, we believe in the way we act is definitely the way to do it. To put it another way, imagine you've got a series of an audience that a customer wants to reach. They'll bring us in their first-party data. We see those customers that they want to look and find. We do build the lookalike models. Inside of our A4IQ engine, or our database, that means we pull back all of the IP addresses, we call them our household IDs when they're anonymized, from a $250 to $300 million sample. And we identify exactly who those people are and the content they consume, from looking at set-top box data, looking at DSP data, looking at CTV data through smart TV, and using that data, build simple propensity models. Right, here's the propensity of the customers that are going to engage with linear television. Okay, well, let's build a schedule that maximizes that. And here's all of the people that have a 0 or low propensity engage in that media, and go out and buy that incrementally in CTV and OTT, so whether that's pre-roll, mid-roll, lay it down with incremental reach strategies like our ad messenger product, which gives us the ability to reach into the household from a mobile perspective. And what you're doing there is, I'm laying down my audience, I'm laying down my messaging, and all of the time, I'm trying to minimize the cost of the CPM to the client, which is maximizing the eyeballs and maximizing the return that they're going to get. So CTV has this very critical role on top of regular linear television, which is the audience that have a low propensity to engage with my base plan. And when you're talking about, for example, Netflix, P2 Plus at 65, run of network, no data, feels very much like a network until we work out what we're going to do with the data they will make available. Excuse me. But do I want to lay that down as my base reach? Or do I want to say, hey, all of my audience is engaging with all of this broadcast and inventory from cable, and again, at the household, anonymized again, but at the household consumption level, so then let me say, okay, my base reach strategy gets me to 3. It also gets me to that point at an average of a $7 CPM before I go spending $25, $45, $65 to incrementally reach the rest of the audience. And that's what we mean by outcomes.
And investing strategically in the various channels is super important. One of the reasons being that even though CTV sounds measurable, there's a reason why we've been using the term walled gardens a lot, which is a lot of the CTV publishers actually don't share the data that's required at the event level to measure in the way that we think that we can. So in that way, linear TV and CTV complement each other so well in that, because it just allows us to measure them all together with actually using technology to drive outcomes instead of just going for technology because it sounds like, oh, this is the new shiny thing, right?
Yeah, I think that I think there's two things there. It's very easy to try and do things on behalf of clients because they say, I hear there's a lot of audience in CTV now, I want to reach into the audience in CTV. And so that makes it easier to actually fulfill on the client request. The second thing is there's still in the marketplace the misunderstanding between measurement and attribution, right? Yes, I have to be able to measure something in order to attribute it, but measurement is not attribution. Perfect example of this, if measurement was just attribution, we'd all just be using Facebook, or not Facebook, Google last click search metrics as this is where the true benefit comes from. So when you get extreme walled gardens where you can't get that shared data, you have to go back to some form of probabilistic model that will do, or if you can build a completely closed environment, which is where the CTV plus TV plus the pre-roll plus other digital activities I'm doing, you can bring that into a really dynamic environment like we've built for some of our programmer partners to do a very sophisticated multi-touch attribution model. So now you're saying, I know that you have this was measured, and I saw 7 touch points and I saw 2 sales, but you only have 40% of that because of all of the other activity that's going on. Now we're getting really into truly measuring the outcomes, and that's where we rely very heavily on partners like, our clients will bring Innovid TV Squared to the table, they'll bring BlockGraph to the table, where we've got partnerships, or LiveRamp, where you really want to start reaching into that identity graph. But there's a point where you very quickly go, there's a whole bunch of activity that I don't have those identifiers against. Okay, so how do I use some form of probabilistic marketing mix model just to help me to understand that final step towards the contribution? And Newstar is a great example of doing MTA plus the marketing mix model to give a great understanding of how you generate real value.
Right, and because of the way that we do measurement, or the way that we must do measurement, if we want to include all those strategies, and because of the pricing premiums, we really need to consider our overall strategy, especially in a time like the recession. Because if you're taking away linear TV budgets from your overall mix at a time like this, what does it do to the recognition of your brand at the end of the day? That's something that's really important to consider. So where does an advertiser start to kind of figure out what the best strategy would be?
Oh, well, that is $1 million question for which there's a couple of agencies just up the road in Madison Square that are very happy to help you answer. The reality is the role of marketing is to try and drive activity through the funnel to get to a revenue opportunity, right, to close a sale. And for most marketers, they very much go into a budgeting session going, I'm expected to grow the business 15% next year. That equates to $100 million. That equates to 1.5 million new customers. That equates to all the different touch points through the funnel. Then what you want to be able to have to do is go, okay, well, what's the role of media in helping you achieve those activities? One of the big things that we always talk about is marketer does that at the beginning of the year, and then they come into the media environment and they start buying their media, and suddenly they start hitting media inflation, and suddenly their CPMs are higher or their cost of engagements are higher. I think Facebook was the one that was going up at 20% a year for nearly 5 years, and it becomes, okay, well, I wasn't expecting it to cost this much, so how do I optimize my in-flight campaigns, which I think, excuse me, which I think is a critical component of this. It was being talked about earlier. It's always on. It's always being measured. But the partnership that exists between ourselves as the agency and the client towards what we're trying to achieve has to be able to dynamically move through those components. The alternative is what we do with quite a few of our clients in many of the ways that we address digital and linear television is we'll actually fix the CPM, right? We'll say, okay, for this period of this campaign, 3, 6, 12 months, we're going to give you a guaranteed price, and we'll go into the market, arbitrage those values to make sure we're reaching the customers we need to, but you're doing it at a fixed price point, so you can actually now start to understand the value that I'm going to have as I start bringing customers in and what the cost is. And we bear that risk, and sometimes we get it wrong, and a lot of the times we get it right. But what it ultimately gives our client is the confidence that I have a price for my engagements, a price for my impressions, a price for my outcomes so I can better manage our business. That's critical in a recessionary environment. I know there are several people that are going to be talking today and tomorrow about, look, there's never been as much pressure on us as there is going into this part of the cycle to make sure that CPMs are efficient, make sure that we're generating true ROI. And that role as a partner really makes it important for us to be dynamic, for us to be continually engaged, and to make sure that we're taking also that burden of risk, because we want to make sure that the client has the ability of being successful, and then they'll come back next year, and they'll come back the year after.
Yeah, so it's all about finding the right balance, and
Yes.
At the end of the day, helping our clients achieve their goals and bring them to the outcomes that they're seeking. So.
Yeah, and that's a critical role that CTV has to play, right? Which is, we're finally really starting to reach out to audiences. I mean, I think 2023 is really exciting because unlike, say, the last 3-4 years, CTV has been fantastic, it's been great growth, but there hasn't been the reach from an advertiser perspective. Innovid put out a study a few months ago in which they did the analysis of, I think it was 60 or 70 brands across 70 countries, and they found that the average percentage of audience that's reached in a CTV campaign is 15%, right? You know, all of us who've been involved in media say, look, I've got to lay down a base media strategy that gets me to 30, 35. The 15% is great because it's probably incremental, and I want it to be incremental, but moving into 2023, we're going to see a lot more AVOD. FAST is growing faster than subscriber-based. We are seeing Netflix and Hulu, Disney bring to the table media content. That's going to create an awful lot more accessibility, and no disrespect to our CTV fans, hopefully bring down the CPM that we're paying in the space at the moment. And so I think that's very exciting from that perspective, because it is giving us the ability really in a television environment to start reaching all of the customers, because we know it's the best form of media, right? It really drives top of funnel activity, especially at the top of the funnel, driving awareness and intent. And we start to be able to demonstrate total measurement. I think that puts us in a much stronger position than television as a media category has been in the last decade.
It's combining all of those resources that we have available, like FAST, AVOD, everything together.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think
Thank you.
with that, we'll finish. Yes.
I'm losing my voice, which is the worst thing for when you're doing a speaking engagement. I know there really wasn't meant to be a Q&A, but as we've got about 3 minutes left, are there any questions in the audience?
I think everyone wants lunch.
I would let them go
Yes.
eat? All right. Thank you, everybody.